been here a while, you know that we don't do this every Erev Rosh Chodesh. We normally don't do the Yom Kippur Katan service. But on special occasions and in times of adversity and in times of suffering, we sometimes get together and we do. So the Gedolim have said, in light of the continuing war, in light of the hostages that are still in distress, we should observe the Yom Kippur Katan service for today. So at 1:45, we're going to go down for the Yom Kippur Katan service. It'll be followed by Mincha, meaning to say it's a few slichos, penitential prayers that we say before Mincha, and then we daven Mincha. But this is called the Yom Kippur Katan service. Now, we're not too hard on you, so we don't make you fast. I mean, officially, if you're keeping Yom Kippur Katan the way it's actually kept, it is actually supposed to be a fast day, but we don't want to be machmer on people. And as a general rule, today we kind of discourage optional fasting. The fast days that you have to fast are the days you have to fast, but we don't encourage extra fasting simply because it makes it harder to concentrate on davening and on learning. So you have to prioritize. Ultimately, your davening and learning is more important than the extra thing of the fast. So if you're a tzaddik and you can function perfectly well, even if you don't eat, you might even be encouraged to fast. But b'derech klal, if somebody, I don't fast. If somebody would ask me, should they fast? My general advice would be not to, because it affects everything else that we're doing. So that's the idea of Yom Kippur Katan. So it's not because of Shavous. It's because of the milchama that is going on. Now, just a little thought. We're coming up, of course, next week to the anniversary of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah on Shavos. First, be sure you understand, in some ways, we didn't. What did we get on Shavos? Meaning, what happened on Shavos? We didn't get the Torah. First of all, keep in mind that the whole story of God giving us the Torah is in the middle of the book of Shmos. There's a lot of stuff that happens after that. So people sometimes make a mistake that somehow we got a Sefer Torah on Shavuos. Certainly not. The only thing we got on Shavuos was the revelation of the Ten Commandments. And even then, we didn't have them on tablets. We heard them from God orally. Then Moshe went up to the mountain for 40 days, 40 nights. He came down with the tablets. He smashed the tablets because of the golden calf. We wound up not getting the tablets till Yom Kippur, right, way after Shavuos. So Shavuos, we got the Torah in an oral sense, that all of us heard from God, at least the first, this machlokes is exactly what we heard. Rashi's opinion is, based on the Gemara in Makos, that the only thing we heard from the Almighty, 3 million people, heard from God the first 2 commandments: I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, and you shall not have any other gods. And every time we heard God speak, we just died and we had to be revived. We finally went to Moshe and said, we can't take this anymore. So Moshe heard the other 8, meaning we did not hear the whole 10 commandments from God. We only heard the first 2. Other opinions do say we heard all 10. And then the Rambam, in the Guide to the Perplexed, has a very, very interesting view that really we didn't hear any words at all. In other words, we heard the voice of God. Only Moshe could make out the words. But we intuited from the voice of God that there was no other God beside him. In other words, not that we heard the words, we intuited from the kol, the undifferentiated voice of God. Only Moshe heard the words. So we have, in other words, 3 different opinions as to what of the 10 commandments did we hear. Rashi's view is we heard the first 2, and then we were afraid and we asked Moshe to be the intermediary for the rest. This is before he went up for the 40 days, for the rest of the Torah. Second view is we heard all 10 of the commandments from God. And third view is we actually heard nothing from God other than the undifferentiated voice, but we intuited from that voice the essence and the truth of God's existence. Now, in truth, the Gemara itself seems to follow Rashi. As I say, Rashi is based on the Gemara because the Gemara in Makos has a very, very interesting gematria. Everyone knows what gematria is. Gematria is simply assigning numerical value to the letters of the Aleph base. Aleph is 1, etc. Some they say it's connected to geometry, although it's not geometrical, but somehow they took the word geometry and they gematria. And here is the thing. It says in the Chumash, a famous verse, Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. Moshe gave us from God the Torah. Now, if you take the letters of Torah, let's add up the numerical equivalent. Tuf, which is the last letter, is 400. Vav is 6, 406. Resh is 200, so that's 606. And Hey is 5, 611. Moshe gave us 611. So the Gemara says, what do you mean Moshe gave us 611? The Torah has 613. Answer, Moshe gave us 611, but 2 commandments we heard from God. Much like Rashi. Rashi's assumption, which not all the commentators accept, but Rashi's assumption is based on the Gemara that the first 2 commandments were given directly from God. And that explains the discrepancy between Torah, which is 611, and Taryag, which is 613. So here's the question. Another question you could ask is this. Is that a commandment? The first commandment is, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Now that's not a commandment. A commandment is either do this or don't do this. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt is a statement of fact. It is a declaration. And yet we see it's counted as one of the 613. So what commandment is it? What is it commanding you to do? So the Rambam actually writes it is a commandment. It is a commandment to believe in God. This is Rambam. The mitzvah of Emunah is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So Ramban, don't write, I know it's hard to get confused. Rambam says it's a mitzvah called Emunah. Ramban Nachmanides has a very logical question. He says, how can you command a person to believe in God? And it's not just, how do you command an emotion? It's more than that. If I already believe in God, then I don't need a commandment to believe in God. If I don't believe in God, then why should I obey the commandment? Who's commanding me? It's like I would tell an atheist tells me he doesn't believe in God. And I say, you must believe in God. He says, why? He says, because God says so. Yeah, but that's the whole point. I don't believe there's any God that says so. In other words, see, people ask the question about a lot of things. How could God command you to have a certain emotion? Okay, but that's not such a difficult question. A person can work on their emotions. But this is very different. How can a mitzvah be directed to someone who denies the source of the authority? It's a problem, by the way, that rabbis often have when they're discussing things with either non-religious audiences or even non-Jewish audiences, and they want to prove something from the Talmud. Well, if you don't believe in the Talmud, it's not a source. It's not a source of proof. Meaning, I can't tell someone who doesn't believe in the Gemara. The Gemara says, right? You got a problem there. So because of this, Ramban argues with Rambam, and Ramban actually says, Emunah in God is not a mitzvah per se. It is a foundational principle for all the other mitzvot. Meaning to say, I first have to believe in God, and then I can understand that God is giving me commandments and obligations. But Emunah itself cannot be counted as a mitzvah per se. Now that's a pretty strong logical argument. So the question, let's go the other way. So what would Maimonides was a smart guy. I think everyone knows that. What would Maimonides say to that? He counts belief in God as a mitzvah. God commands you to believe in him. How is that even possible? So the way it's explained is the following. Maimonides surely agrees that you can't tell an atheist to believe in God. You can try to convince him, but you can't just say you have to believe in God. But the mitzvah is directed not to a non-believer, the mitzvah is directed to a believer. Ah, you'll ask me, but if he believes in God, he doesn't need a mitzvah. The answer is, this is Maimonides' emphasis on intellectually understanding the existence of God, meaning you, who learned from your parents, who learned through tradition that there's a God, and you've accepted that in your life, you are obligated to determine the intellectual justifications and foundations of that belief. In other words, the mitzvah is, thou shalt be a philosopher who not only believes in God, but who intellectually understands the basis for that belief. And thus, Maimonides maintains, so it's really the opposite of what you think. When you hear the word faith, that normally connotes blind faith. According to Maimonides, the mitzvah of emunah, maybe faith is not even the right English word to use, is to philosophically understand the necessity of a creator. And thus the Rambam understands that philosophical exploration to prove the existence of God is actually part of the mitzvah of emunah. Now, what's so interesting is that there were many other authorities who considered that to be improper. They said, don't open up a Pandora's box for a very simple reason. Once you set yourself the assignment to philosophically try to prove the existence of God, then God forbid you might be opening up a Pandora's box that takes you down the wrong road. So many Gedolim took the position that if you're a believer, just be a believer. Don't necessarily open up the Richard Dawkins or the Christopher Hutchins or all of the Sam Harris, all of these guys, the unholy triumvirate, I'm sure there are more too, of atheists who are involved in Kiruv. Right? It's a new thing, atheism and outreach. Used to be atheist was a private thing. They left the outreach to religious organizations. Now there's a concept of atheist kiruv, in which their goal is to spread their poisonous ideas to ever-widening circles. So this is a machlokas that exists to this very day. Do we encourage philosophical exploration of Judaism? Or do we encourage the notion of experience and tradition without necessarily opening things up? That's why you'll find, for example, that a great classic book like The Guide to the Perplexed, the Rambam's great philosophical work, is not going to be found in the regular base medrash. I'm not justifying this. I'm not. If someone had wrote me a letter, I'm not saying it should be this way or not. I'm just explaining a fact. Because in many ways, certain philosophical explorations are sometimes discouraged because they can open a Pandora's box. Now, Or Samayach might be a little different than a lot of mainstream yeshivot, because a lot of our guys have already been exposed to Christopher Hutchins and Sam Harris, and who's the other guy? I forgot. Who's the three? Okay, I don't remember. But anyway, so the point is, when you've been exposed to ideas, we obviously have to respond to them and deal with them and address them. But if you're a person who grew up totally in a religious environment, and you were never exposed, should you be exposed? So again, the Rambam, I think, would say yes, because the Rambam says you need to philosophically demonstrate the truth of your convictions. So the Rambam would encourage that. There are others who say it's better not to explore issues where you don't know where you're going to come out. So this is a very live issue. It was an issue in the Jewish community among the great rabbis for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's an issue that continues to reverberate even today. But as I indicated, the Or Samayach experience is a bit anomalous. It's a little different, meaning we got to do stuff here that actually might be discouraged somewhere else. Again, I'm not, I need to emphasize, because I don't want to get hate mail or whatever it is, I am not giving you my personal opinion on anything. I am just being a journalist reporting the machloksim that exist within Am Yisrael, whether we should explore certain issues or whether we should accept them on the basis of faith. And of course, it depends on a person's background, a person's inclination, a person's interest, what a person has been exposed to. Because obviously, the more you've been exposed to those ideas, the more you need to have a response to them. But what if you haven't been exposed? Okay, so these are educational issues that rabbis and educators and parents within their own families, if you want to raise your child religious, that you do have to grapple with. But be this as it may, Shavuot is the day of the Ten Commandments. Now, all of you know, you probably remember, and you'll know it in a few days anyway, that there's an old Jewish custom to stay up all night, the night of Shavuos. We study Torah all night. Now, Baruch Hashem and Eretz Yisrael, even in the Northern Hemisphere generally, it's a relatively short night. It kind of begins around 10:30 or 11, and we can already start davening around 4:30. But in the Southern Hemisphere, you should know, the nights this time of year are very, very long. I was once in Johannesburg for Shavuos. The learning session was 10 or 11 hours because the night starts at 8 and they can't daven until 8. It was unbelievable. That's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to stay up 12 hours, into a long night. But okay. Now, what is the source of staying up all night Shavuos? It is not in the Gemara. In fact, it's not even in the Shulchan Aruch. It's not a halacha at all. In fact, as great a man as Reb Elyashiv did not have the practice of staying up at night because he made a calculation that he did more learning on his regular schedule than he would if he stayed up all night. Because what happens is you stay up all night, you're really kind of very, very exhausted the next day. You're out of kilter for a few days. He felt it was more important to stick with his regular schedule. So it's not etched in stone, but it is a widespread custom. And it's brought down that the source of the custom is a medrash that says that the night before God was going to give us the Torah, we went to sleep, and we didn't get up in the morning. When the crack of dawn, God comes to give us the Torah, we're asleep. God had to wait for us. So in order to make up for the fact that Hashem had to wait for us, we kind of show up. So we're there early. By the way, that's why some people ask me the question sometimes. If I can't stay up all night, is it better for me to learn late into the night or to go to sleep early and get up early? It seems to me that the logic of the custom is to get up early, because the whole point is at the crack of dawn, when Hashem shows up, you're there. So if you have to make a choice, better to go to sleep early and get up before dawn than to learn late and get up regular time. But that's the logic of it. But be it as it may, it's a tikkun. It's a rectification for not getting up. So here's the question. God is giving you the Torah the next day. This is like the biggest moment of your life. This is the biggest moment in history, actually. If you had an important job interview, lahavdil, the next day, you're not going to get up late. In fact, you'll have problems even sleeping. So they simply fall asleep and they get up late and God is waiting? It's actually very implausible. How could that even be possible? So there's a beautiful pshat that Lubavitcher Rebbe offers. And he says the following. He says, this was not a sleep of laziness. This was not even a sleep of exhaustion. This was a sleep of holiness. That's why the Medrash makes the point. There were no mosquitoes that night. There were no bugs that night. He says the Jewish people knew they were going to encounter the holiness of Hashem. But they also knew that when the soul is entrapped within a body, there are limits as to what holiness you can receive, because we're physical creatures. So when the great tzaddikim go to sleep, it says all of our godly souls are released at night. What's keeping us alive is the animal soul. So what happens when we sleep is our souls, our godly souls, are separated from the body. They ascend to heaven, and they can achieve all types of understandings that they were not able to achieve when the soul was in the body. In fact, in truth, this even works with us on our very low level. I mean, in many times, a person may go to sleep with a certain problem. It may be a Torah problem, and it may even be a secular problem, a math problem, or an issue in life. And you wake up with the answer. Like, how do you explain that? I mean, you were asleep. The answer is your soul, when it leaves the body, is able to achieve and understand certain things that it couldn't understand within the body. There's actually a type of out-of-body spiritual experience. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe says the Jewish people went to sleep because they wanted to get the kedusha of being separated from their bodies. So it was a noble endeavor. It was not laziness or indifference. So now the question becomes the opposite. If it was such a noble endeavor, why was Hashem critical, and why do we have to make it up by staying up every year? The answer is, it was noble, l'shem shamayim, but it was mistaken, because the purpose of the Torah is to teach us how to sanctify the material world and not how to escape it. They thought holiness was by leaving this world. Holiness is by engaging in this world. We have many, many functions that we share with animals. We eat, we have intercourse, we have elimination. These are animalistic functions. These are the things that humans share in common with animals. But the Torah teaches us you can take every function of yourself and use it to serve God. I could eat in order to have strength to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Have children, take care of my body, take care of my health, play basketball, jog, whatever you're doing. If you're doing it in order to serve Hashem in a better way, the sex and the eating and the exercise and the traveling all becomes a mitzvah. Unlike some traditions that say, like, let's say Catholicism, to be truly holy, you have to be celibate. And we know how well that's worked in the Catholic Church in a variety of ways. But putting that aside, the teaching of that holiness is by renouncing the world. We believe you embrace the world and you elevate and sanctify even the physical parts of yourself. So their mistake was they thought they would achieve Kedusha by leaving the body. But the message of the Torah is you sanctify God within your body. And that's why we need to make that point. Okay? So that is the inyan of why we have to be metaken, the sleep of the Jewish people, the night of Shavuot. So I guess we do have to stop a little early. I apologize. We're having a service in the Beis HaMedrash. And I wish all of us, all of you, all of us, that we should be zocha to receive Hashem's Torah with love and enthusiasm. And as our sages tell us, ki ish echad uvelev echad, we have to be like one person, one soul. We need unity. Without the unity, without loving and caring about all Jews, we will not merit receiving Hashem's Torah. I don't know how many of you knew Rav Rakmel, Zecharno Levracha, the Rebbe who passed away. Remember Sunday we had a big funeral, and those of you who don't know him, it's a very, very big loss. And those of you who do know him, maybe it's even a bigger loss that they lost such a precious person. But he was a person who did exemplify caring about each and every one of his students, not only when they were in Or Samayach, but when they left Or Samayach, got married, had children, whatever their issue in life was, he was there for them, and that's really a role model for really the way all of us should be. So when a great righteous person leaves the world, there's a tremendous void that's created. So the responsibility is on us to try to fill the vacuum by emulating the ways of the tzaddik. So we can learn to care about each other more, to be concerned about each other, and to be committed to growing in Torah learning and service of God. We will be elevating his neshama, and we'll be following in his ways and partially filling the great, great void that was created. So I wish you all a Chag Samayach and a Kabbalah Satorah B'Simcha.
Thank you for listening to this Samayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.